Welcome, everybody. It is Thursday, and therefore we are in our series of contemporary Israeli poets. Let me open my PowerPoint. As you well know, I do every single time, and today as well. So I will introduce the topic for you. So first of all, we will start with what we are planning to do today. This is a very exceptional session. All our sessions so far concentrated on one single contemporary poet on Thursday, and one of the great who are not with us physically anymore on Tuesdays. This is the first time that we have more than one poet in our class. Actually, we have 4 of them. A gentleman, Eliaz Cohen, whom we met last week, and 3 women poets. So let me go one by one and introduce them to you so that you remember those whom you met already and get to know one new name. So Eliaz Cohen is going to be a few minutes late because of the change in time, daylight saving in America, etc., all those complications.
I'm here.
You're here. Hello. And you cut your hair.
Yeah.
Okay. So Eliaz is here. He made it. He ran from the other class and made it to our class. So you know Eliaz, he was introduced last week. We are not going to reintroduce him. Then on my screen next to him is Shlomit Naim Naor. Let me tell you something about Shlomit. Of all the people that are speaking to us in this Thursday series, that I make you feel as if I know them from kindergarten, I know none of them personally. Eliaz I once met in a political meeting when he was busy arranging stuff. Shlomit is the only one we are friends, and I've known her for years. So will you unmute yourself for a minute, Shlomit, and say hi? I cannot hear you. Shlomit, something wrong with your sound. You will need to fix that. Not a word.
Can you hear me now?
Now you're good.
Okay, so Erev Tov or Tzoraim Tovim, and thank you for inviting me again, Rachel. And as always, it's a pleasure seeing that so many people are that passionate about Israeli poetry.
Okay, thank you, Shlomit. And
thank you for your leadership.
Okay, toda rabah. And Shlomit, I'm going to very rudely mute you now and introduce or reintroduce to you Sivan Har Shefi, who was with us already. We had our Siyum, you may remember, a while ago, was with Sivan Har Shefi. So Sivan, are you here? Can you turn on your camera and say shalom to everybody?
Hi, shalom everyone. I'm very glad to be here again in springtime.
Yeah. Yofi, we have a special message from Sivan that we will deal with later. And here's a person that I never met in my life, not even on the screen until a few minutes ago. And this is Bakol Serloi, also a poet, also belongs to Mashiv Haru'ach. Will you unmute yourself for a minute, Bakol, and say hi to everybody?
Good evening and good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, morning for some of them, but never mind, okay? You need to know, all of you, also Shlomit and Sivan and Eliaz, that we have at least 1, maybe 2 participants for whom it's 5 a.m. in the morning in Australia.
Well, that's a real passion for poetry.
Okay, and one of them, Shlomit, is Joy, who was the host of your brother when he was visiting Sydney. So talk about Jewish geography. Anyway, so this is what we are here to do. What makes it possible to do it is Ari Katz, our sponsor from Southern California, Orange County, the man who dreamt up and brought into being CSP, the Community Speakers Project. And Ari, are you there to again tell us how grateful for us to tell you how grateful we are for your support? If you're there, you are more than welcome to say hi.
Well, I'm grateful that you're grateful, and I'm grateful for you and everything you've done, Rachel. And I'm looking forward to having everybody join us when you interview Meir Shalev in May. So hopefully
Yeah,
everybody
we
will
will
join
tell
us.
everybody about that. Yeah, absolutely. I'm already getting ready for that. And it's not enough, because as in every session, we have Eliran Mazuz with us, who was Eliaz's choice today for our musician. And you will hear from him and more about him as we go. So welcome, Eliran. And in order to make the musician program possible, we have people who sponsor the musicians. And they are Gila Appleby and Martha Hauptman and Elizabeth Pressman, who are our people to support the musicians. I will ask everybody's patience for 2 or more minutes when Pnina is the person whom I'm inviting today to share a special moment. We are celebrating this week the 1-year anniversary of our program. And I invited people who are ready to share a moment that was special to them among the 144 sessions that we had so far, provided they don't speak about me. They speak about themselves, they speak about their learning, they speak about the community. So Pnina, are you willing to share your special minute with us?
Yes, I'm very happy to. I don't see Eliaz, but I want to share with him how much I was touched by the poem, An Invitation to Cry. It's not just a permission, it's an invitation for soldiers to cry. And with Eliaz's poems, I was also very I had a very strong emotional reaction, sadness to Arnon Lapid's poem about crying, following the encouragement to cry after the Yom Kippur War. Then it brought memories to me, because during the Yom Kippur War, I was in my second year at the School of Social Work at the Hebrew. And I guess October, we all left, and I went back to Gduda Kesher, to the north of Israel. I was an officer.
To the army unit, yeah.
Yeah, the army unit, to be what they call Ktinat Nifgaim. I was a Segen,
an officer in charge of dealing with the losses and announcing families, yeah.
So the main task was visiting wounded soldiers from, it was communication, mostly soldiers from the Golan Heights in the hospital. And I have really kind of almost like a vague memories, a lots of phone calls, a lots of visiting, seems to be a lot of action. The other part that really affected me, and I think that's what the crying, and I never really processed it, was some of the contact was with families of what we call Chayalim Ne'edarim. I guess
soldiers who are missing in action.
Missing in action, meeting with the families, talking to the families, and I don't even think I ever knew, whether they survived, whether they were killed, whether they came back to Israel. And then 3 months later, I think this October, January, I believe I went back to the School of Social Work, and it almost like I had to condense in one semester, I had to condense the whole year. And it was such an abrupt shift, almost like closing a door and really struggling to finish my study. I had a dream of studying in North America, which I did later. I had a vision of my own life, and I studied at McGill and actually living my life in Canada. But I was really touched and amazed how events that took place almost 50 years ago, you know what I mean? And how it's really like how much crying is left in me that probably was never really fully expressed, expressed, processed. Interestingly, I've been a social worker, I'm a psychotherapist, I deal with grief therapy and bereavement. But you know how we say we all the bare feet shoemakers, in our profession. So again, it was very special to have to connect with such a deep feelings of events that took place, almost 50 years ago in my life.
Thank you so much, Pnina, for sharing. And I repeat again, people who want to share special moments that happened to them in the course of this year, please email me and I will schedule you to one of the classes. We, as always, start with music. So Eliran, I want you to wait now 30 seconds, because it so happens that the first song that we are starting with is not just any song. Eliran set to music a poem by Sivan Har Shefi, and he is going to sing it to us. Sivan, will you read the Ivrit for us of your poem? Because I never do when the poet is there.
Wow, it's such a surprise for me. Thank you very much. Really exciting. ועוד, אל תעשה ממני מה שאני לא, אלא עשה ממני מה שאני עוד.
And more. Do not make me what I am not. Rather make me what I am more. Od. Bevakasha, Eliran, please sing your music to us.
אל תעשה ממני מה שאני לא, אלא עשה ממני מה שאני עוד. אל תעשה ממני מה שאני לא, אלא עשה ממני מה שאני עוד. אל תעשה ממני מה שאני לא, אלא עשה ממני מה שאני עוד. אל תעשה ממני מה שאני לא, אלא עשה ממני מה שאני עוד. תעשה ממני מה שאני לא, אלא עשה ממני מה שאני עוד. אל תעשה ממני מה שאני לא, אלא עשה ממני מה שאני עוד. אל תעשה ממני מה שאני לא, אלא עשה ממני מה שאני עוד. אל תעשה ממני מה שאני לא, אלא עשה ממני מה שאני עוד.
Wow, toda rabba rabba. Thank you so much. And you know, Eliran, and you know our participants that Eliran is with us, and he will meet us down the session for 2 additional songs. And now for what we gathered here, to get to know the story, the amazing story of Mashiv Haru'ach. So what is Mashiv Haru'ach? If you go to your internet and you actually put on Google Mashiv Haru'ach, you will come to the site. And I have asked Efrat at this very moment to put the URL in the chat for you, but I'm asking you not to go there now, but to stay with us. What I'd like you to see, that most of the material and the information is indeed in Hebrew, although there is one section in English that will give you at least the gist of things, not as much as in Ivrit. But there are many of you who are Hebrew speakers and could make you use and enjoy what Mashiv Haru'ach has to offer. So this morning, Efrat told me first 26, and then she wrote me again to correct that it was 27 years ago almost when a group of people got together to create a new literary magazine that they called Mashiv Haru'ach, which, you know, we do have a seasonal prayer to wish and pray and ask for wind and rain, but also lehashiv ruach is to return your soul, to return your spirit. So it has more than one meaning. And indeed, publication, issue after issue, started appearing. And there are poets there who come from an Orthodox background, but many others as well. Efrat sent me a few screenshots of the cover pages of Mashiv Haru'ach, and there were so many that I chose two because, you know, like kids, sometimes I love the picture. But you deserve more, so here is more. Here is now an idea of how many issues Mashiv Haru'ach had so far, I think over 70. And there are issues that deal with poetry about women, and there are others that deal with poetry that is prayers of today, and there are such that commemorate a poet, and there are many, many more. You will go on the site and you will figure it out. But Mashiv Haru'ach is not just a literary magazine. It organizes events around poetry and around music. So they have these conferences of Yemei Ahava L'Shira, love days for poetry, where people gather to read and interpret and talk about poetry. And you know already from me that the Hebrew language does not distinguish between a poem and a song. So they always go together with music, and you can see one of the many, just a picture of one of the many performances that they created. And if you think there is just a small club of 2 or 3 people who get together to read literature, think again, because in the good old days and hopefully in the coming good new days, many people gather, and I trust and I wonder how many of the over 220 people that are with us right now recognize the site, the venue. This is Mitcham HaTachana HaRishona, the first train station in Jerusalem that now is sort of an open mall of coffee shops and restaurants. And if you ever came to Hartman in the summer, for sure you spend some of your time in Mitcham HaTachana, but other people as well. So here is just, you know, a picture of that. And again, if you think that Mashiv Haru'ach is mainly about people who are observant, people who wear headgear, head covers as women or men, think again, because here is an event that was created in memory of the poet Chaim Guri, who was many amazing things, but observant he was not. So Mashiv Haru'ach is a world in itself, which is worthwhile exploring, and we are not going to do it justice because in our sessions, we do not talk about, but we try to touch the real thing. And we will have a special way of our own to explore Mashiv Haru'ach. But before I go there, I'd like to invite Efrat Cohen, who is the spirit and the make it happen person behind the scenes. And we agreed this morning, Efrat, and I hope you will indeed deliver what we agreed on, is to ask you to tell our participants what is the one thing that you would like for them to take away from this session about what Mashiv Haru'ach is. Will you, Efrat?
First of all, I'm very excited to be here. For me, Mashiv Haru'ach is a community of poetry lovers. Poetry that draws from the Jewish bookshelf until the contemporary poetry. And people who love to meet, to hear one another, and not only themselves or people like them. And I hope that the meeting with Rachel, which led to this meeting, to meet all of you, and to other cooperations with a Shabbat anthology, Shabbat poem anthology that is going to be published in a bilingual edition. I hope this meeting will lead us and you to join us and be a part of our community.
Toda Rabba Efrat, and this is a good opportunity for me to mention that we already started with consulting a few of you, and more will be invited to join, because once I heard a couple of months ago that Mashiv Haru'ach was now working on an anthology of Shabbat poetry throughout the ages, I said, hold it. This is something that people I know outside of Israel will be interested in. And we started rolling already, and hopefully a bilingual anthology of Shabbat poetry from the house of Mashiv Haru'ach is already in the first phases of being created. And now, what is the special different mode that I would like for us to know about Mashiv Haru'ach? It's by inviting 4 voices, starting with Bakol, who are all poets who not only have published their poetry in Mashiv Haru'ach, but also were editors of certain of the issues, to share with us one of their poems, to then tell us what is the one issue of Mashiv Haru'ach that is special to their heart, and why is that? The first to go is Bakol Sorloy. And I wonder how many of you are wondering about her name. Bakol. Did you ever hear about a woman called Bakol? Well, I figure many have not, so we will share with you the origin of the name. If you go to your Torah and you go to Genesis Bereshit chapter 24, you will find that in verse number 1, it says, Bakol, will you read the verse for us in Ivrit?
ואברהם זקן בא בימים, ואדוני בירך את אברהם בקול.
And Abraham was old, well stricken in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. Bakol. And what does Rashi have to say about that word?
Rashi have to say that Bakol, if you count in Gematria, if you count the number of letters, it's 52, and it's a boy in Hebrew. But in the Gemara, in Baba Batra, it's written that all the good things that Abraham could be blessed, he had no daughter. So Bakol means that he had a daughter. And my parents heard about it when my mom was pregnant. She read all the Bible in order to find the best name, the most beautiful name in the Bible. And I dare say that they found many, many very weird names. And Bakol was one of the most beautiful names they found. And after my mom gave birth, she saw me and she said, that's Bakol, and that's my name since I was born.
Okay, so Bakol, I would like to ask you now to read your poem to us in Ivrit. And I wonder if Heather, if you are there, if you are willing to do the English for us.
Ken, I'm here.
Okay, that's good. Bakol, lead us through your poem.
I would love to, and I will say that my good friend Shlomit, which is here, she translated it beautifully to English. So thank you very much, Shlomit. בתחנה. אישה צועקת לתחנה, באלוהים, אם יש לך אש בוא להאיר לי, להיות לי נר בלילה, שלא פניך באפר, שלא אתעשן, ואפילו אתה נוטל את נפשי וזורע את הסוד שאנו ברוח, ואפילו כל גופי ואתה לא דרך, תמיד ליסע אליך, להתעיין ולרד עד בוקר, עד שתאספני עולה כעמוד העשן, כצעקה, ותהיה לי מר כחיה, כמנהמת בתחנה ימים שבורים.
תודה רבה בקול. And Heather, will you lead us with the English, please?
At the station, a woman is shouting at the station, for God's sake, if you have fire, give light. Be a candle for me at night, so your face won't be an ash, so I will not be smoked. Even if you take away my soul and sow the secret we are into the wind, even with all my body, and you are not the road, always on its way towards you, to become nothing, to descend till dawn, until you lift me, sacrificed, like the pillar of smoke, like a shout. You will be bitter to me as the beast, growling at the station, broken days.
Wow. This poem that I met for the first time barely a week ago took my emotions, my mind, and many, many readings to be able even to touch very delicately for you today. We start a poem that is going to be a conversation with the divine. We start a poem that is going to develop into a prayer, into a request at the station. This is Jerusalem. Bacol could take us to the Western Wall. She knows the way. She could invite us into her synagogue. I don't know which one is that. There are so many places, spiritual places in Jerusalem. I can think of the amphitheater of Hebrew University looking at the desert. But no, this poem is about seeking God in the everyday, in the station, when you are waiting for the bus, when you are angry about something, but you could be late, when you're going to a meeting, to a work that you do not like. It's the station that it takes you and holds you, and you need to cry out, for God's sake. If you have fire, no, give it already. Give light, because I need a candle at night. Why? So your face won't be in ash. So I will not be smoke. Look at the juxtaposition, almost a biblical parallel. Tikbolet, we call it, you know, Matovu Alecha Yaakov Mishkenotecha Israel, when the two parts of a verse say something that sounds similar, but is not exactly, and look at what is one next to the other. God and I don't want your face in ashes. I don't want to turn into smoke myself. There must be a very low moment in life when you cry out so bitterly and you are facing the possibility that God may turn into ashes while you yourself are smoked. And now we go a step further. Even if you take my soul. And so the secret we are, I wonder if the we is all of us you are beings, or it's the continuation of the previous lines, you and I, God, we, the two of us. And you spread that and scatter that into the wind. Even with all my body, and you are not the road. Now, sometimes when you look at a poem, you want to look at its structure. And sometimes the structure will reveal something that you couldn't see at first reading. So I think that here in this poem, something in the structure will be helpful. We have reached the middle of the poem. I counted the lines. And once you get here, there's going to be a shift in tone. There was a pain, and out of the pain comes a commitment. Even if all my body, and while knowing all my body, I also see that you are not the road. If I lose faith, never mind. I will continue no matter what. So these two lines together, the wholeness of the body with the recognition of doubt that maybe you are not the way, never mind. And when we can sail into the end of the poem, always on its way towards you, to become nothing, to descend till dawn. And we have, you know, recollections and sounds from earlier commitment until that moment, okay, until you lift me, sacrifice, like the pillar of smoke, that sign to which the whole people of Israel could go to the promised land. Like a shout, you will be bitter to me as the beast growling at the station, broken days. Yalla, full circle, we are back at the station. It didn't become an ideal. There is no sweet, happy ending. The cycle is repeated. You haven't moved away from the station. You're just again facing the daily in the last line as you have started off. But what a journey in between. And what a journey I had with this poem. So thank you, Bakol. And as I warned you when we spoke this morning, this is when I invite you to answer, to comment, to disagree, whatever works best for you.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm very moved and touched for your beautiful reading and your sensitive reading of this poem. I must say that when I write, I'm always in the center of the present. And this poem is very old for me. I can tell you one thing about it, that Rabbi Nachman Mibreslav, his last words to his Hasidim was, I will say it in Hebrew and then in English, נכון, אתם אנשים כשרים, אך לא לזאת הייתה כוונתי. רציתי שתהיו כחיות הנוהמות ביער לילות שלמים. He told them, you're all very kosher people, you're all very good and very religious, but that's not what I meant to do with you all these years. I wanted you to be like growling beasts in the woods whole nights. And I think that he meant that if you are too religious, you leave your wildness aside, and you shouldn't be so orthodox. Sorry for referring these words in this way. And I can tell you, I don't want to talk a lot about this poem, but I want to tell you why I wrote it. I was waiting in a bus station in Jerusalem when I was 23, I think. And I saw a woman. I think that she was not well. I think that she was mentally ill. She was a beast, and her hair was colored with many colors. And she was wearing a too tight, very pink shirt. And you could see that she is not well. And she was sitting on the station, and she was saying Tehillim in such a passion. I think it was Tikkun HaKlali. It's the 10 chapters that Rabbi Nachman, 10 Tehillim chapters that Rabbi Nachman told his Hasidim to say. And she said it so passionately. And then she came to me and she asked me, do you have fire? Do you have cigarette? And I said, no, I didn't smoke there. Then years later, I started to. And I was so impressed by her passion. And I told myself, well, perhaps that's what Rabbi Nachman meant. That every time that someone is praying, it's like he's throwing himself away. It's like committing a suicide. Sorry for saying such a hard thing, but that's what I felt. I think she put herself in the world in a way I never saw in my life, and I never saw since then. And until today, I never saw anyone praying like this way, davening this way. And I was so moved and so touched. And I felt, you know, we have many, many words. As an Orthodox woman, I am surrounded by so many beautiful words. But I felt that here is something new. Here is something I never met. Here is something wild. Here is something that not just talking to the Lord, she's asking him to be with her like a beast who is growling in the night and calling to the other beast to be with him. It was amazing. And I was so moved that I wrote this poem.
Thank you so much. And we will have more time at the end of class, as most participants here know, for a conversation and for people to ask you. I'd like to invite you to the second part of your part in this session. And when I asked you what is your favorite issue of Mashiv Haru'ach, you said the one of the two that dealt with women. So take a few more minutes and tell us why you thought this was a special issue for you.
I must say that I had the honor, the great privilege and honor to edit two beautiful, beautiful parts, Mashiv Haru'ach about women. איך אומרים גיליון? Issue. Two issues about women. And it was inspiring. That's how I met Shlomit, by the way. And since then, she is one of my best friends. And it's amazing because I want to say something very personal, but I grew in the very heart of the Orthodox religious Zionism in Jerusalem. And when I was a girl, something was wrong with me. And what was wrong? I was writing poetry. And as a girl, it was cute and nice. But when I was a teenage, people started to be worried because how will I find a shidduch with such weirdness? And my grandma told me when I was 20, well, it was my age and I had to be married and soon because I was too old. When I was 21, she was crying because I'm so old and not married yet. And my grandma told me, how will you find a man when you are so smart and you are writing, you are so weird? You have to hide it when you find a date. And I felt that something is wrong with me. I was sure that maybe I really have to hide it because who will ever marry such a weird girl? That was my feeling. I felt very, very bad with myself till I met Mashiv Haru'ach. And I want to say another thing. When I grew in a world that every woman knew her place, everyone knew her place, knew his place, and women knew perfectly what to do and what not to do. And I had to be modest and shy, and I had to be very grateful for being a woman and to wash my husband's socks, or maybe to help him to study Torah, or help him to build a settlement or something, but not to do anything for myself. And I wanted to read poetry and I wanted to write. And I felt discriminated in so many places. I couldn't learn Gemara. I couldn't daven as I wanted. I couldn't do anything as I wanted. But the only first place that I felt equal was in Mashiv Haru'ach. That was the only, that was the first place in my life that I felt equal and right, because I was writing and they appreciated my writing. And when they asked me to edit two issues, it was supposed to be one issue about women, I was thrilled because I felt that I can give something back for the women that couldn't write and they didn't have a voice because her voice was never counted, not in Minyan and not in the world that I used to live. And it was an inspiring year for me to read so many poems that written by women and was meant to them. And
I'm going to sort of conclude this part of our conversation, although I could listen to you for hours and I probably will in the future. But thank you for that. And I remind everybody, Bakol is staying with us for the conversation later. And this is a perfect switch to our next poet, my friend of so many years, Shlomit Naim Naor, who wrote already published 2 books. We will see the cover page of the next one shortly. And I'm putting on the text in Ivrit and inviting Shlomit to read it, which will be a perfect continuation to the world that Bakol invited us into. Shlomit, bevakasha.
בתשובה לשאלה, לא הקמתי משפחה עד שהכרתי את האיש שאיתו התחתנתי. בגיל 36 התחתנתי. כבר יכולתי להיות אימא לנערים בגיל ההתבגרות, להינשא צעירה, לבלות לילות בתשוקה או בשתיקה, לריב על היכן נהיה בסדר, ולמה הכיור מלוכלך, ולמה תמיד אני ואיפה היית, ולהתגרש מרירה, לעשות דיאטה או שתיים, לצבוע את השיער, לנסוע לטיול מאורגן, לוותר על האמונה ולחזור בתשובה, למחזר משכנתה, לקנות דירה או שתיים, או לכל הפחות לשפץ את זאת שכבר יש לנו. כי גם את הקירות צריך להחליף מדי פעם, לא? ולהחליף רכב כל 3 שנים, ולצאת לחופשה דו-שנתית, פעם סקי בחורף ופעם אירופה, או אפילו פעם אחת הודו לחודשיים עם 4 ילדינו. כי כאלה אנחנו. והתגרשנו כי הרגשנו שהאהבה מתה, ואז החברות מתה. אולי בעצם אתה מתה. וככה, בגיל 36, אני אלמנה בלי גרוש. בהחלט. הייתי יכולה לעשות את כל זה, ואז להיברא מחדש. אבל לא היה כלום. פשוט חייתי וחיכיתי ונסעתי וקראתי, ושבתי וחטפתי וחיכיתי ויצאתי לדייטים וחייכתי, ורזיתי שוב עליתי במשקל, ובכיתי ויצאתי לדייטים ודיברתי מדי, ואז חייכתי ושתקתי, כי כבר לא היה מה להגיד על נו, אז מה חדש אצלך? ושוב חיכיתי ויצאתי לדייטים ושתקתי וכתבתי ובכיתי, וחיכיתי והחלטתי וניסיתי, וחיכיתי עד שהוא בא, והפך הכל.
תודה רבה. Heather, I think this was written for you to read. Nobody else on earth would do this justice.
In answer to a question, no, I did not raise a family until I met the man I married. At age 36, I married. I could have been a mother to teenagers, to have married young, to have spent nights in lust or in silence, to quarrel over where we'll be for the Seder, and why the sink is dirty, and why always me, and where were you, and to be divorced in bitterness, to do a diet or two, to dye my hair, to take an organized tour, to forgo faith, and to repent, to recycle a mortgage, to buy an apartment or two, or at least to renovate the one we have already, because the walls too must be replaced sometimes, no? And to change cars every 3 years, and to go on a biennial vacation, once to ski in winter and once to Europe, and even once to India for 2 months with our 4 kids, because that's the way we are. And we were divorced because we felt that love had died, and then companionship had died. Maybe, in fact, you died. And so at age 36, I became a penniless widow. I certainly could have done all that and been created anew, but there was nothing. I simply lived and waited and traveled and read and returned and wrote and waited and went out on dates and smiled and lost weight and regained it and cried and went out on dates and talked too much and then smiled and shut up, for there was nothing more to say about. So what's new by you? And once again I waited and I went out on dates and I was silent and I wrote and I cried and I waited and I decided and I tried and I waited until he came and turned over everything.
Okay. Speak about happy endings, Shlomit. But indeed, we are not allowed to reach this happy ending until we go through this journey. And look at the interesting structure that Shlomit is offering us. She is telling us what really happened in the second short part of her text, her poem, whichever way you want to call it. The body, the way this is beginning and developing, is all fantasy. it never really happened. None of it ever happened. Could have. Speak about the road not taken. There was a whole, plethora of options of stuff that could have happened, all within the accepted parameters. She was not turning wild. Even the images, even the imagination of those, what could have been, it's all within the framework of what is expected, accepted. The biggest adventure. Wow, 2 months in India. Paint the walls. Get a divorce. But I remind you again, it never happened. What really happened were the gory details of the waiting and the crying and the trying and the not giving up. And then it did happen. Would you like to add something, Shlomit, to our reading on that? And you know that I will invite you to also discuss your favorite Mashiv Haru'ach issue.
Sure. This really happened, and someone actually asked me. It was a simcha, it was a Shabbat Chatan, and someone there asked me, when did I get married? And I said, when I was 36. And he asked me, did you raise a family before you got married? And I was like, and like in the films that everything stops and everything goes like in slow motion, that is exactly how I felt. That person really opened it out loud, the option of having a full life before marrying Nisimi. And I was blown away. And the whole Shabbat, I was like in fog. I was not really there. I was just like struck, as if I was struck by lightning. And Rachel knows it's a pun, and I'm referring to another poem that I wrote in my first book that deals with late marriage. And when I was the editor of a whole issue that we had regarding Shani Le'atzmi, about being alone and lonesome. And we accepted, my co-editor, Renana Eisenberg, and me, we accepted a lot of poems. And I felt that something was missing. And I felt that what was missing was the story of late marriage. And I felt that I have nothing to contribute. And then I said to myself, wait, you have a lot. And a lot of my poems start by a question that I've been asked. I'm struck by the question itself or by my answer. And I try to think like what I have to add. And that was like really saying it all those thoughts about the life I could or maybe should have had by the age of 36 and a half when I got married.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that surprised me the most is how people feel it's about themselves. And for me, and I'm referring back to what Bacol said, sometimes the most individual, particular experience that one has is something that so many people can relate to. It becomes universal because the pain is universal, because the need for repent or repair or understanding or empathy is something that we all share. And although I know exactly where this happened and, in which neighborhood, which house in Jerusalem, I found people from all around the country telling me how much this is really relevant for them. And here I'm getting through the chat a lot of messages saying that this really refers to their life story and how they felt for many years and the decisions they made regarding parenthood, singlehood, waiting, not waiting, and so on and so forth. And regarding my favorite issue, I love this issue. I think the poetry is excellent, and well, I edited, so I'm joking. And I think something that really special happened there is the correspondence between the visuals, the images, the ceramic work, and the artist that is accompanying the issue, and the poetry. And we really managed to catch there a lot of unique voices. And Rina Jean Baruch, who's an Israeli poet, she has a PhD in literature, wrote in that issue a poem that has the line, Lo yadati shachutz kayam. I did not know that the outsides exist. And I was struck by how much it's Corona time, verse. I didn't know that the outside exists because of these days of Corona and staying at home, the whole relationship with the outside is like something different. And this was published almost 4 years ago. And that poem really proceeded.
Okay, I would like to thank you very much. And again, remind everybody that you are here with us to stay for a bit more. I'm going to pull out of the PowerPoint right now, and we will take a break. I just want you, as we move to listen to Eliran's 2 songs that he will share with us now, because he cannot today stay to the end of the session. So we will. But what I'd like to say before I ask you to start is just pay attention to how both Bakol and Shlomit relate to the place Mashiv Haru'ach has in their life and how connected it is to their own personal experience and how it provided the venue to become who they have become. Eliran, bevakasha, your piyut, and everybody, please remain muted.
Lecha Eli teshukati Becha cheshki ve'ahavati Lecha libi vechilyotai Lecha ruchi ve'nishmati Ashiveni ve'ashuva ve'tiretse et teshuvati Ashiveni ve'ashuva ve'tiretse et teshuvati La 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 Lecha Eli teshukati Becha cheshki אהבתי לך ליבי וכליותיי לך רוחי ונשמתי או ישיבני ואשובה ותרצה את תשובתי אשיבני ואשובה ותרצה את תשובתי la 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 la.
Thank you, Eliran.
Thank you.
Give us a head start towards Pesach.
Okay. This is Echad Mi Yodea. It's composed by my very good friend Akiva Goldstein. אחד מי יודע אחד, אני יודע אחד, מי יודע אחד, אחד אלוהינו, אחד אלוהינו, אחד אלוהינו, שבשמיים, שבשמיים ובארץ. שניים, מי יודע שניים, אני יודע שניים, מי יודע שניים, שני לוחות הברית, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, שבשמיים, שבשמיים ובארץ, שבשמיים, שבשמיים ובארץ. שלושה, מי יודע שלושה, אני יודע שלושה, מי יודע שלושה, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, שבשמיים, שבשמיים ובארץ, שבשמיים, שבשמיים ובארץ, ובארץ.
תודה רבה רבה, אלירן.
Thank you.
So beautiful and so what we needed today and for the coming days. Eliran, please put your contact information and where people can listen to more of your music in the chat because they have been requests about it. I'm
Okay.
sorry
Thank you.
stay with us to the end, but we loved having you for as long as you could. Toda rabah, and we are back to our poetry. And yeah, indeed, people read the chat. I highly recommend it you do because you will enjoy reading what is there. And we are continuing to our next poet, Sivan Har Shefi, with a poem about Sarah. I again want to remind you, Chaverim and Chaverot, that we met already Sivan Har Shefi with a whole session of her poetry, and many of you expressed the wish that she should come back. I would also like to mention to you that Sivan is now spearheading a new, small yet important organization called Adabra, that is for people who had suffered sexual abuse and violence to get together for creative writing. And she's dedicating whatever honorarium she's getting today to this organization. And I'm inviting all of you who would like, this is not a body that needs a lot of support, because all the people, the writers who work with the people in the group do not get paid. It's just a rental of the place and some mentoring for the leaders of the group. And please, if you find it in your heart to be able to help this particular creative group, to help the silent find their voice, think about it, write to me, and I will put you in touch. And now back to our poetry. Sivan, you sent us this poem. It was your choice like everybody else, and I'm calling you to read the Ivrit, the original, for us.
I'll just say that it's a poem out of 9 poems that are all called together Sarah. אלוהים מדבר איתי מאחורי הקלעים. במטבח האוהל הוא מסתודד איתי כמו שכנה. מקום חם וריחני אפוף עדים. אני מנפה קמח וקרן אור חודרת באוויר המתאבך. זה סוג של התגלות. ורק הנחושת מן הסיר הממורק. סהרוני הבצק הלבנים על הדס השחור. שברי הקערה שנפלה. ערבוביית אבקות התבלין. אלוהי היופי והדיסוננס. אומר לי בתמונות, לא במילה. אלוהים שמדבר עם אברהם בפתח, שמתהלך עמו כאורח בחוץ, ומשקיף אל עתידים, בא בתוככי העיסה שאני לשה. בא כבת בית בשלהבת הנר המרצדת, עושה בי תנודות, אורחת לי כנשים צורות עתיד מפותלות, במרק העדשים שהמצאתי, מתכון לאהבה בריאה.
Thank you. Heather, you know that I'm not letting a guy read this. You understand that it is your role today.
God speaks to me from behind the curtain in the tent kitchen. He secretly confides in me like a woman who is my neighbor, a place warm and filled with smells, wrapped in steam. I sift flour, and a ray of light penetrates the rising air. It's a kind of revelation, a flash of light off the copper of the polished pot, the crescents of white dough on the black tray, pieces of the plate that fell, a mixture of powders and spices. The God of beauty and of dissonance communicates with me in pictures, not in words. God who speaks with Abraham at the entrance, who walks around with him like a guest outside and contemplates the future, comes within the dough I need, comes like a household member in the lively candle flame, causing me to quiver, my guest resembling women, forms of future twisted in the lentil soup I invented, a recipe for healthy love.
Thank you, Heather. Sivan, honestly, I must tell you, I don't know which one made me laugh more. That Sarah is using words like dissonance, I love that. The fact that she is proud and bragging about inventing a new recipe, I totally identify with. And oftentimes I make fun of myself because of all the other things that I am sort of okay at in my life. And then I can be so proud of my achievement of a new recipe that is successful and well received. I'm totally, when I'm not doing poetry, a foodie and a cooking and a baking person. So this was my poem today. I so love the image of being able to find and communicate with God while you're doing your dough, while you're inside the tent, and the whole guy's world outside there can do whatever they want to do. You know that God is in the dough and God is in your hands and you can shape it. And he becomes a woman like the Hebrew. If you look, those of you who can do that, count the fourth line from the bottom. Orachat li kanashim. It can be a guest, female from, but the expression orach nashim is something which is sort of hidden here in this sentence, is something about the bodily functions, the monthly functions of the woman body, fertility, creating life, and God is all part of that. So in an odd way, Sivan, somebody looking at this can say, how can you dare speak about God like this? It's a chutzpah, it's a sacrilege. And on the other hand, you're saying exactly that which our tradition had always said, that God is in everything, and in the creation, and in bringing life. So why shouldn't he be in the pride of creating a new recipe? I totally agree that he should be part with that, because this is exactly how I feel about it. And Sivan, please lead us with your own thoughts and insights that you would like us to have into this poem.
Thank you so much for your reading. It's full of grace. I wrote this poem was and is very important for me. It was, I wrote it in a time when I was really eager for becoming a mother, and we were married 3 years and we didn't have children. I had some few abortions, and none wanted abortions, and there was pain. I didn't know why, and then I think it was very instinctively written. These all 9 poems. It took me very short time to write them all, as if it was some force coming through me. And I think I was trying to connect to my femininity, to my body, to my things that I was not enough attached to in conversation with. And through the voice of Sarah, I suddenly could do that. It was like accepting the body, accepting the
תגידי בעברית אם את צריכה.
כן, את כל העולם גם של הגשמיות, של החומריות, כאילו.
Accepting the physical world, the world of here and now.
Yeah, as part of reality, and as part of my also being a woman, and I really felt that writing these poems was the gate to becoming a mother.
Wow.
And a few months afterwards, I got pregnant, and
so this is a natural passage for us to your choice of the Mashiv Haru'ach issue. You chose a similar one, also the one about women.
I think this issue it's dealt with taboos, with really there were poems about machzor, about
menstruation,
and about eros and sex and body, and things that weren't very talked or written, weren't very written about in the Orthodox community. And it also opened for, I think, everyone to read and write and talk about. And I really loved the art. I think it was Anne Ben-Hur who had a lot of drawings, beautiful drawings through this Gilayon. So that was my choice.
Thank you very much, Sivan. And ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the gentleman. So we are moving on, and bear with us for a little bit longer today. as we introduce Eliaz's poem, because when we met Eliaz last week, we dealt with his personal poetry, and he asked me, no, and when are you going to do some of my other part? So I'd like to first, as we go into the poem, and Eliaz will read the Ivrit for us, of course, look at the title, The Barrier Crasher. When I read the title, Poretz HaMachsomim, this is the image that I had in mind. And I trust that maybe some of you will have similar images, that this is what a thing that crashes barriers look like. Well, if you thought like me, you should, like I did, think again. Eliaz, will you read the Ivrit for us? And then we will ask Stuart to read the English. Bevakasha.
תודה רבה רחל. I'm so moved because I see my teacher now, Ali Yihya.
Well, you deserve to see him.
Yeah.
Of blessed memory.
פורץ המחסומים. לעלי יחיה, מורי מיני אז, עם מינויו לשגריר ישראל באתונה. בשעה מדומדמת זו, למרגלות הגלבוע, בשעה שאני לבוש זית ועל כורחי נאסף אל שומרי החומה, מעבר הגבול ג'למה, פעם מחסום, פעם דרך עולם מעמק אפולה אל עמק דותן ואל דרך ההר והאבות. בשעה זו אני חושב עליך, עלי יחיה, איך באת וכל כולך החם הקרסתני מגלגל אלינו ילדי מתנחלים קטנים, בני סבא ותמניה, בארץ השומרון המתעורר, את הגרוניות המרקדות של שפת הדד. בשעה מדומדמת זו, שבים בני עמך עלי, עם שבשדות, ואני עומד להם מעל הראש, בכל הבידוקים, והגרוניות ההן, שבאו אז לפיותינו הזעירים, שוות ומחפשות לשון. בשעה מדומדמת זו, הכל כמעט ואפשרי, כשליבי שר ערבית, ויוצא אל האישה, שבצליה התפזרו מתוך השק לכל העברים, ואיך בשקט הגאה הזה שלה, היא מלקטת ומלחשת אחד מן השירים, שלימדת אותנו, עלי יחיה, מכפר קרא, באלקנה הבתולה הנבנית. ולא ידעתי ששורשים לך ולכפרך בגבעותינו, שתל אבות שלך שנעזב באחד יום אל ג'ומעה לפני 200 סנין, מצאו בתל סיר בשר ועצמות עזוב על פחמים, סמוך ונראה מאצלנו. בשעה מדומדמת זו אני רואה אותך, עלי יחיה, נושא בדגל הטלית, במרומי מושב אלי יוון שבאקרופוליס, ואיך בנפש ערבי הומיה מאחה אצלי את כל החתכים בנפש האחת. כאן במחסומים יורד עכשיו השקט, ורק זהב קליפות הבצלים שנאספו עוד מגלגל ריח השיר ההוא, וריח מבוכת האישה, והחייל שמעליה הוא אני, הוא אנה מושתק לק, יא סיד עלי. בשעה מדומדמת זו, למרגלות הגלבוע, עוד מעט ייפול היום על חרבו, וערב כחול קובלתי יעלה מבלי ירח. מג'נין היפה ובנותיה, שוב יסתלסל השמיימה, האללהו אכבר במקם המופלא, ואני אשלח אצבעות כהן עברי אל אהוביי שבהרים, וגם אליך.
Thank you so much, Eliaz. And I didn't check, but I hope, Stuart, you're there.
I'm here.
You know I can trust you without checking. Please read this poem to us and just follow the lull of the narrative. Please, Stuart.
I do my best. The barrier crasher. At this dusky hour, at the foot of Mount Gilboa, when I am dressed in drab against my will, to join the guards of the roadblock, the Jalama border crossing, at times a roadblock, at times a road ascending from the Afula Valley to the Dotan Valley, and to the road of the mountain and the fathers. At this hour I think of you, Ali Yihya, how you came all warm and paunchy, rolling to us, little secular children of Sabia and Tamania in the land of waking Samaria, the dancing gutturals of the language of Hadad. At this dusky hour your people are returning, Ali, the people that are in the fields, and I stand in their way with all security checks, and those gutturals that came then to our little mouths return searching for a language. At this dusky hour, almost anything is possible, when my heart sings Arabic and goes out to the woman whose onions have spilled out of her sack all over the place, and how, in her proud silence, she collects them, whispering one of the songs that you taught us, Ali Yahya, from the Kara village in the Virgin Elkanah, which is being built. And I didn't know that you and your village have roots in our hills, that your ancestral mound, which was deserted on an El Yuma day, Mitan Snin ago, they found in the mound a pot of meat and bones left on the coals, near enough to be seen by us. At this dusky hour I see you, Ali Yahya, carrying the prayer shawl flag in the heights where the Greek gods of the Acropolis dwell, and how, in an excited Arab soul, all my cuts are healed in the one soul. Here at the roadblock, silence descends now, and only the gold skin of gathered onions still broadcasts a smell, that song and the smell of the embarrassment of the woman and the soldier standing over her, meaning me, and Ana Mushtaq Lak Yasid Ali. At this dusky hour at the foot of Mount Gilboa, soon the day will fall on its sword, and a cobalt blue evening will arise with no moon. Pretty Yenin and her daughters once again will curl skyward, the Allahu Akbar in the wonderful Makam, and I will send fingers of a Hebrew priest to my loved ones who are in the mountains, and to you as well.
Toda rabba. I trust you do realize, my friends, that we would need at least an hour to read this poem properly. So let me suggest the following. Let us focus on the moment when this is created. The narrator voice is in a military gear at a checkpoint, checking Palestinians as they are coming back from their works day in Israel and going back to the Palestinian Authority, Judea and Samaria. He himself was raised in a settlement called Elkanah, in which, lo and behold, somebody bothered to hire a teacher of Arabic who was Ali Yihye, who taught them the sounds, the guttural, the numbers that he keeps repeating, and songs. Ali Yihye moves ahead in life and becomes Israel's ambassador to Greece. I wonder how many of us are aware of the fact that, yes, there are Arab citizens who can and did become ambassadors of the state of Israel, and therefore covered with the flag, which is like a talit, because this is what our flag of Israel looks like. And the memory of the Arabics and the song from childhood, rolling as children of 7 and 8, come back as a woman at the border crossing. Her basket, got scattered with onions all over, and as she is miserably collecting them, she hums to herself one of these songs. And maybe this was the trigger for the whole poem because it brought back the memory. This is at least how I read it. And there are references to Hatikva, of course, which is an Israeli ambassador need to stand erect to, although it speaks not of an Arabic humming soul, but of a Jewish soul, which he doesn't happen to own. And it speaks to you about a soldier who happens also to be a Kohen and a poet, who is embarrassed having to do all these duties, and yet he is there because it has to be done. And while doing so, offering a prayer to both his beloved ones that include Ali Yechye, mind you, gone a few years ago. The one thing I will want to draw your attention to, as we have done with previous poems, is the biblical reference. So when we come to the lines that at this dusky hour at the foot of Mount Gilboa, soon the day will fall on its sword, the reference is double. It's a reference, a biblical reference to 1 Samuel chapter 35, when the Philistines are fighting the people of Israel, and the people of Israel are losing, and the king falls on his sword rather than be tortured by the enemy. The same line is being picked up later by the poet Alterman, and who writes the following lines in 1945, mind you, before the state. The battle day and evening are over, full of shrieks and retreat. When the king falls over his sword, Mount Gilboa is veiled in defeat. So Eliaz, as he has done for us in the previous poem that we have seen in the past, manages to collect a present with a nearby past of childhood, with a older past of the days before the state is created, with a much older past of the battles of the Hebrews and the Philistines, and as if these cycles keep rolling and repeating as the blessings of the Kohanim resound time and again. We ran a little bit over time. I'm not going to ask you to discuss your favorite issue, but which is an interesting one, and we may come back to it later. I'd like to first of all, to thank all our participants today, our readers, our muters, and invite all of you who are willing to stay for the conversation. Those of you who need to go, on Tuesday, March 23rd, we have the first of 2 sessions about Sutzkover. I will be joined by Dr. Anna Gonscher from Montreal, a professor of Yiddish literature from McGill, who will, together with me, help us get into those poems. And comes Thursday, a day before Pesach, we are going to have a session, Manishtana 2021, with a poetry around the Seder table, the best of the 3 sessions that I have done last year about Pesach poetry, with 2 new poems. So welcome one and all for all. And again, we are back to our classroom. I, as you know, am here with my notebook to collect your names. Our presenters are here with us, and I'm inviting you to stay as long as you can. If any of you, Bakol, Shlomit, Sivan, Eliaz, need to leave early or now, please let me know so that I can collect questions to you first before you need to go, okay? And I can see Adrienne already, and I trust Ed, you will help me with seeing all the hands. Elizabeth, I see you, thank you very much. Do I have anybody else? Carol Diamond, okay, I have you, and yeah, I have you, Carol. so far, Adrian, Elizabeth, and Carol. Do I have anybody else? Let me check the others.
Suzanne.
Okay, Suzanne, got that.
Gail.
Gail.
Who?
Gail.
It would be Gail. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Well, I do have 5 names, so why don't we start? And let me tell you something else. Those of you who were with us at the Zelda class earlier this week, I promised you that one of the poets today, it's Bakol, has something that she could help us understand the Hasidic part in Zelda's poetry and personality. So when my turn to ask a question will come, I'm going to ask her about that as well. So I'm telling you. And by the way, Shlomit, did you see Joy on the screen? Shlomit, can you see Joy on the screen?
I think I saw her earlier for sure.
Hi, Shlomit.
Okay.
Moshe, your brother, stayed with us in Australia when he was there with the Zionist camps.
Okay, so I had to have this Jewish get-together. I mean, you'll have to agree that if you have somebody in Yerushalayim and somebody in Sydney, Australia, joining a literature class and they happen to be related in one of those classical Jewish things, we needed to let them say hi to each other. But Adrian, you were first. Go.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that I just love this last poem by Eliaz, and it presents a possibility of peace, of humanity between the Israelis and the Palestinians and the Arabs, and I loved it, and I really appreciated it very much. And I'm going to read it over and over again. But before that, I wanted to say that I wanted to talk to Bakol, because if you're an English reader and you see her name on the screen, initially you think that maybe it's Bakol in her voice instead of the information that she gave us about it coming from Abraham and Bakol as giving the daughter. But she said that she wanted her voice to be heard. And so if you look at it, the translation a little bit different, and instead of Bakol, you say Bakol, and that's what it looks like in English, then it makes sense all around. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Adrian. It's wonderful to connect these two meanings of the sound of Bakol. And we are going to you, Elizabeth. Please go ahead. Question, comment.
Okay, first, I want to say every single poem today was so meaningful. They were just wonderful. 2 things. One, in the poem about not being able to get pregnant, Sarah, the poem Sarah.
I'm going to put it back on the screen, yeah?
My granddaughter has a friend, and 2 years ago, her friend is modern Orthodox and is in a family with 4 children. 2 years ago, her mother carried a baby for a woman who apparently couldn't, who lived in another city. And today, there are so many different things, so many different ways for people to be able to have children when in years ago you couldn't have had children. And that was a very beautiful thing. And the other is, I have a question for Eliaz about the woman who dropped her onions. Are the soldiers forbidden to help any of the Palestinians when he said she picked them up and he had to stand over her?
Eliaz, serious question. Go ahead. Please unmute.
Yeah, it's a tough question, and it's only one spot, one point at this embarrassing event, and like Rachel said, and the duty, the orders are very well. when I served in my reserve duty, it was 14, 15 years ago, were very hard between the soldiers and the Palestinians. And I had the privilege to try to soften it and to make, to create a dictionary with a total different vocabulary and music and something much more gentle and polite. I don't want to be the, you know, the polite conqueror, but at least in those years that we hadn't get an agreement, and Rachel asked me to speak a little bit, and we don't have the time, but I leading among other partners, Israelis and Palestinians, a new movement for new horizon for peace between Israelis and Palestinians, which is called A Land for All. And we have connection all over the Palestine and also abroad, also even with now with the Joe Biden administration. So it's a vision about sharing the land, not splitting it. And by the time that we will achieve this vision, we are forced to defend ourselves and try to do it with as much in humanity that we can do it.
Thank you. And it reminded me, Rachel, in the Mandelbaum Gate, how the soldier looked away.
Thank you. And I would like to also let other people have a voice. So thank you for that, Eliaz, and for taking the opportunity. Let me also share with you that Land for All, the organization, I never told you that, Eliaz, I got to hear about it from my daughter from Kibbutz Hanaton, who started going to your activities before I ever heard about it. So sometimes, you know, you even learn stuff from your kids. And thank you very much, Carol Diamond. We are going to you.
Yes, I first of all, just very quickly, you know, this is such a large class, like over 300 people, and I appreciate the conversation and how you've managed to call on many of us to participate. And I think that means that you are a Mora b'Chesed Elyon. I really do. And, you know, when the poem was talking about the mixing of the dough, and it reminded me, stream of consciousness, it's not exactly because she was talking about God in the dough. I was thinking of Bialik, you know, Me'ayin Yavo Anchati or Shirati, and his mother would cry, and it would Nachon. It touched me so much as a kid, you know, when I was 10, 11, 12 and study. And then the other comment, I saw somebody write to somebody else, not to me, that they went to the Yeshiva of Flatbush. And I want to say that that is why I, as a graduate, 12 years, can appreciate your class. And if there's anyone here, you made the connection between Australia and Jerusalem, but if there's anyone in the class who has gone to the yeshiva, please write to me, Carol Diamond, on the chat. I'd love to know who you are, and I probably do know who you are. And the other thing about cooking, you know, today, a lot of men are cooking. You know, it is not the province only of women. I mean, it's recent, although we've had the greatest chefs were men, but I mean home cooking. Like my grandsons, they're the cooks in the house. The women are face what they're doing, but they're cooking, you know. So, you know, I just think we make, just as we're including the Palestinians, and we should include the men sometimes. Anyway, Rachel, thank you for the class. Really.
Thank you very much, Carol. We are going to you, Suzanne. Indeed, many people today, so people try to keep your comments short, and if you have clear questions to address to our poets today.
First, I want to say a special hello to Sivan. She was the poet on the day that we dedicated to Stuart. I remember it clearly. We both cried, and it was a special day, and I just want to give her a hello. Her poem was great, but it was a special hello. And Eliaz, I just want to say, wow, because that really got to me. As a very left-wing person, it really got to me. But the poem I really wanted to talk about was Shlomit's. Yesterday, my therapist and I, women of a certain age, like you, also, Rachel, are women who married young as we did in those years. And now Shlomit could be our daughters easily.
She's younger than my kids, yeah.
Yeah, she's younger than mine also. And we got married, not necessarily making good choices, had children, the best part of those marriages, but went on to be divorced and then found our true loves. And in reading that poem, because I said to my therapist yesterday, if I were young now, I would never have married. I married because I wanted kids. Today, you don't have to get married to have kids. And it just really got to me. And I copied it immediately and texted up to my therapist.
Okay.
And I know you, Raquel, can relate to that because you also found Yossi.
You are not
and
getting me started on my stories today. Because a whole session, and we are not.
Rachel, can I respond quickly?
Of course you can. This is why I got you here.
So Susanna, thank you for this. And a friend of mine is a therapist here in Israel, and she called me the other day, telling me that one of her patients came in, sat down, and handed my book, and she said to her, pages this, and that. This is how I feel, and I cannot talk about it, but let's talk about the poems. So
now your book of the things we don't talk about, we don't mention, will become a textbook for therapists. They'll just go, treat me for page 22.
Exactly.
Okay, that is a chidush indeed. That is a chidush, a novelty. This is a riot, Shlomit, really. Okay, thank you, Suzanne, so much. Gail, it's your turn after that, John, and I see you, Deborah, as well.
Yes, thank you so much. Every one of your classes is such a joy, and this one, superb. My question is very simple. How did the founders choose the name for this organization and publication, Mashiv Haru'ach? Maybe it was explained in the beginning and I missed it, but if it wasn't, I'm very curious to know, how did they choose that name?
I don't think we did explain, so Eliaz or Efrat, who is going to do that?
I wasn't among none of us here, not me, not Sivan, and not Bakol and Shlomit, were among the real founders. I joined right after the publishing of the first issue of Mashiv Haru'ach, and I wrote prose mainly, prose and allegories and something like that, and Mashiv Haru'ach was one of my catalysts to write, to come from the prose to poetry, into poetry, but I knew them before they published the volume, and the founder, main founder, Shmuley Klein, was thinking, he was, of course, inspired from the Sidur, from the blessing in the prayer, the Shmoneh blessings, the 18 prayers, blessings that we say each 3 times a day, and on Shabbat also on Musaf, Mashiv Haru'ach u'morid HaGashem. It's double meaning here in our in our echoes, it's not only the one who blow the wind, it's also the one who Mashiv
brings the rain, brings the rain.
No, resuscitates, give life back.
Yeah.
Not only that, but give back the spirit. Give the spirit back. And the spirit is the spirit of culture, which is poetry. And Shmulik felt that this was the time on 1994 that the spirit of Jewish Israeli, this combination wasn't common. It was the first time that the phrase of combination of Jewish Israeli, because these two identities were like in a battle, the battle of identities, battle of culture battle, and he invented this combination, Jewish Israeli poetry, as giving back the spirit, the original spirit of Psalms, of the Jewish bookshelf, onto this present, now, here and now, how that Jewish Israeli present poetry can claim its voice, and Mashiv Haru'ach is like a bridge from the most ancient scriptures and sources and the Bible and the Siddur and the Midrash until the modern and the postmodern poetry.
Thank you.
Eliaz and John, all the way from Arizona. Bevakasha.
Oh, Slicha, my hand wasn't up. I'm sorry. I don't know. Maybe someone else named John. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I thought I saw you, but never mind. Deborah, we are going to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to focus my comments on Bakol today. At the station was evocative of a number of things. And I think that there's something very poignant in the description that Bakol gave us of herself at age 24 in the Jerusalem bus station, meeting or seeing this person with the multicolored hair and the, clearly a person who didn't fit into the norm, who may have been floridly psychotic at the time, but was reciting psalms in the passionate way that struck the poet so profoundly. Rather than a question, this is a comment, how it reminds me of the way we look away sometimes at those very raw expressions of human need and pain. And what Bakol has done, it seems to me, in this poem was to relate it to what the Hasidic Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav had said about the beast growling in the forest. That I think that it was a very powerful connection that she made. To that point, I wrote down a question which maybe has to do with what was a powerful beast growling in the woods for Bakol herself. I wondered what were the practical implications to her own family life when she felt the validation that she described in the community of poets that she met at Mashiv Haru'ach. Was it one of those moments like what we've heard others describe of, something that changed and had those sorts of real changes? Bakol?
Deborah, thank you for your question. I hope that I understood perfectly what you asked. If I understood, you asked me if I felt a change after I entered Mashiv Haru'ach about my life. Yes, I was so happy, and it calmed me down. Well, I'm not the very patient and calm person that Eliaz can tell, but I dare say that it was the first time in my life that I was not afraid that I'm crazy. Really, because, you know, Virginia Woolf, in A Room of One's Own, she writes about Shakespeare's sister. Well, I'm not as talented as Shakespeare, Baruch Hashem, but she says that every woman that was gifted as Shakespeare's himself in the age of Shakespeare, she would be crazy or a witch, and she would doom herself to a miserable and lonely life. And till I was 22 and I entered Mashiv Haru'ach, I felt so lonely. No one read my poems. I felt that I'm writing for no one. I felt that I have no voice. I felt so peculiar, not in the good way. And I felt that perhaps I'm really crazy. Perhaps, you know, if everybody in your everybody in your life tells you that you're not okay and you're not normal, you start to believe it. And in one day, I remember it took something like 5 months since I sent my first poems to Mashiv Haru'ach, and until they answered me, yes, we accepted them all. I sent 3 poems and they accepted them all. And it was the happiest day in my life. I will never forget this day. I remember that I walked away and I felt that the whole street is opening in front of me. I can't even explain myself what I felt, because I was so thrilled. I was so happy. And since then, everything became much better, because I understood that I had a gift. Many people think that they're not gifted because no one hugged their talent, their talents, the way they are expressing themselves, the special things in them. And I felt so happy. And I felt that I found a new family. And it's a very important thing for me as an Orthodox woman that I can express myself, that I have a voice. You know, I'm not counted in a minyan. Today, my son talked with my husband and he asked, can we, לצרף למניין?
Join, invite.
Can we join an underage boy to a minyan? And my husband says, he's Rav. He said, of course. And then I asked, and a woman, he says, no, I'm so sorry. But here in Mashiv Haru'ach, I have a voice. I'm counted, and I'm the part of the minyan, not in a synagogue. But I'm equal. I'm not discriminated anymore. And it is so important to me. I am sorry, I'm talking only about one aspect of Mashiv Haru'ach. It's not fair, because I am not talking, it's all about the poetry and the inspiration that I have with all the groups. But I'm talking only about one aspect, but it is so important to me.
But it is an important aspect, and this is why we asked you to be here today, because we don't want to make sure we cover all the aspects of Mashiv Haru'ach. We want to touch the things that are meaningful to the people who are present here. So thank you for your honesty. Indeed, Bakol, thank you very much. And
I have a question for Bakol about the word להתעיין.
Why don't you raise your hand and then I will put, who is that?
Well, this is Nili. I don't put my picture or nothing. I just wanted to know does it mean להתעיין?
להיות אין, להיות עין, שלא קיים.
לאפס? להפך לאפס?
להתעיין.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Nili, for your question. Do I have any other raised hands, חברים? And חברות, of course. Yes, Josefa, go ahead, please.
Yes, so Eliaz, you're doing something incredible. We need more of you, more people like you. You are unbelievable. Bakol, I have a question to you about this, the secret, the sword. I don't know if you can say it, but did I understand correct that this secret is the thing that you that you felt that you had no voice, that you felt that you had a struggle with that, coming from an Orthodox family, being in that Orthodox community, you felt that that piece that you couldn't express yourself, that was missing. Is that your secret, if I'm allowed to ask?
Unmute the call.
You're kindly allowed to ask, and thank you for your beautiful question, Yosef. No, I think that the secret is intimacy. The secret of two people or two significant others that are meeting is the secret, and it's between a man and woman, or man and man, and woman or woman, I don't care, and especially between a person and the Lord. It's a secret, and it's a secret that should not be spoken, but it has to be revealed a little, because I think that is the story of my religious life. It's a story, it's a secret, but it's also a treasure that wants all the time to be found.
Toda Bakol, and Heather, who is now on the screen right next to you on my screen. I don't know where you see her, but please go ahead, Heather.
Just a couple of short things. The first one to Bakol, I was particularly struck in her poem about the two images of the smoke. In the first part, the ash, and yes. In the first paragraph, she talks about being.
Hang on, Heather, for a minute. Let me pull up the poem so that people can relate to it. Okay.
It's kind of like a.
Go ahead.
So it's called at the beginning, where she talks about shelo panecha be'efar shelo et ashan, that I will not be smoked. And in this first image of being smoked is a very destructive image, that if she doesn't have God, if God is not, if she doesn't see God, she's going to burn up. She's going to be smoke, and she's going to be nothingness. And in the second part of the poem, where there's some kind of connection with God, God is lifting her up, and she's sacrificed. She becomes a pillar of smoke, which becomes actually a positive image. It helped the Jews get through the desert. So there are two ways of being smoke. In one, you're being saraf, you're being burned up. And in this way, in the second smoke, it actually it signifies kind of a connection with God. And I thought that was a very nice kind of double use of this image of smoke, positive or negative or positive. So I like that very much. And the second one I wanted to say about, I love Shlomit Naim Naor. I really love her poetry. But I'll play the devil's advocate and say, when she says, at the end, she didn't get married until she met the one, and then everything changed. And you could say, well, all you're doing is you're saying, finally I found a man and he changed my life in a bad way. Finally, I was able to chap somebody. And on the other hand, you could say, no, she really means that she met a beshert and then she found a relationship. But I wanted to say that there's a kind of an ambiguity, and there could be people who would shoot this down and say, maybe, she's shooting herself in the foot and saying that her happiness really finally depends on finding a guy. So I just wanted to bring that up.
You didn't meet Nisimi, Heather. You just don't know Nisimi. Because
no, I know that's not true. I just wanted to say, play the devil's advocate and just say,
totally invalidated.
Okay.
all we say is Nisimi, and everybody understands. You can friend him on Facebook, and then you'll get it. But Shlomit, I will let you react to that. I just couldn't hold back.
You're spot on, Heather, and I think that a lot of what I write is pushing the limitations and the perceptions that we have on what things are. Because I am as independent as I used to be. And I don't see it as a salvation and redemption, because it's hard work, married life. Like, it's, there's a lot of laundry to fold, and there are a lot of things to do. But there's some aspect of being lonely that has changed. And luckily, I'm in such kind of relationship that I don't feel lonely. And I saw there was a discussion in the chat box whether being in a relationship is end of feeling alone. And we all are, we all know it's not. But I am in a place where I don't feel alone. And sometimes I do, because after so many years of being alone, something creeps in and becomes part of my identity. But so many things have changed.
Sure, absolutely. I just wanted to kind of throw it in as a little bomb in there.
No, you're spot on, and it's something that I do in my poetry. This kind of pushing the limits and playing with ambiguity. Yeah. So it's spot on. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Carol again with her hand up. Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, I just don't want to take anybody's place because this is the second time. But if it's okay, I just want to ask Bacol. Okay, make it very quick. I want to ask Bacol how she spells it in Hebrew. Is it with a kuf or a kuf?
Oh, no.
Kol with a voice. Kol with a kuf. No. What?
It's Bacol like everything. Bacol
okay, so my comment is irrelevant. All right, I was thinking of Bacol. But when I was at Hadassah from 86 to 2004, 18 years, I was the education director. We were so concentrated on feminism, written out of history, Phyllis Chesler, all those women. We produced books. I'd love you to send me your email. I'll send you some of our stuff of, being included in the Minyan. There's now a new book called Kaddish, where women are expressing how they feel because they can say Kaddish in certain rituals. So, this was such a major thing. And I thank you for your honesty. I just thank you. I was very touched by it. I'm very touched by your poetry, Bacol.
Thank you, girl.
Yeah, so God bless and keep you and keep writing.
Thank you, I will.
And Bacol, I would ask you to put your email, if you don't mind, in the chat for Carol to copy, and then she could write to you.
Yes, please. I'm not finished. One more sentence. The Singer brothers, Isaac Bashevis and Joseph I.J. Singer, they had a sister. Did you know that they had a sister? They had a sister, and she wrote a novel, and hardly anybody even knows that.
Okay,
that's it. I'm finished.
You said one sentence. It's now 7.
Well, that's right. Okay, you will. Okay.
Thank you so much. And Michal, I am going to ask you to hold back for a minute, and Audrey too, if I may, and just tell me your opinion. And if you say no, it's okay. I'd like to take that opportunity that Bacol allowed me to take advantage of and ask her about Zelda's Chassidut. So if you don't mind, let us give Bacol a few minutes to explain that to us, because I think it will address many of the issues that came up Tuesday. Unless there is somebody who totally opposes that, then yell. But other than that, Bacol, the question that was asked on Tuesday is, how could an observant Orthodox Hasidic woman like Zelda write at all when you yourself said that you were looked upon as crazy? And she came like 30 years before you. How was that possible for a Zelda in the world she lived in?
Thank you for that question. It's a great question, and it should be answered. Well, in Jewish history, we don't have nobility, but we do have aristocracy. And Zelda, she was from a very aristocrat family. She was a kin of the first Rebbe of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman from Ladi. And she was the cousin of the Lubavitcher, the last Rabbi of Chabad. She was the first cousin. Her father was his father's brother. And she had an opportunity that many other women didn't have. She grew up in Russia. There was no way for an Orthodox, for an observant woman to live that way in Poland. Because in Russia, women had more opportunity for studying. Even in Russia, the lower classes had more awareness for literature than the low classes in Poland. And she lived in a family with her grandfather, who was a very well-educated man. Well, he didn't go to university, of course. They studied in yeshivas, but they were all very well-educated. Zelda herself read all the Russian literature. She knew poetry. And after they came to Israel, they immigrated to Palestine. She studied in many places. And she also took free classes in university, not for a degree, but she learned, she studied, and she also watched movies. Well, she was a Haredic and observant woman, but she was very, very well read. And I think that she, you know, I come back to Virginia Woolf in A Room of One's Own. She says that the beginning of the women's writing is from the women from first classes, because they have time and they were well educated. Well, Zelda didn't have time because she had to work, and she worked extremely hard because her mother and her didn't have money, and they were so poor that sometimes they were starving to, they didn't have bread, really, literally. But it was very important in their house. And I think these things gave her a very free spirit that other women didn't have. That is one thing. The second thing is that in Chabad, not like other Hasiduyot, it will never happen in Gur or Vizhnitz or Belz and even Breslav. It will never happen. Women were educated, and women were encouraged to how can I express this? To find themselves. I'm sorry, I'm a bit excited.
בעברית?
Excuse me. כאילו לצמוח מבחינה אינטלקטואלית ולבטא את עצמם בעוד דרכים.
To grow intellectually. To develop, to grow.
To develop. Till today, you can find a woman who manages a bank and who is a doctor in Chabad, not in other Hasiduyot. And that is one of the things that is most important in Chabad. That's why I feel very close to Chabad myself till today. Perhaps I answered the question. I hope so.
Thank you so much indeed. And I wish you were there Tuesday, but it's wonderful that you are here today to complete that gap that I wasn't sure how to address. And I remember Michal, and after that, Audrey, and I will take more following that. Michal, if you're still there, please go ahead.
Let me follow up on your question. We were curious on Tuesday is how the community responded to Zelda. Did they read her poetry? Did they give her a pass because she was part of the such an important family? Could you tell us a little bit more about that? That would really be helpful.
Well, the sad truth is that Zelda was never, Zelda's poems were never read by the Chabadic people. She sent her poems to her cousin, the Lubavitcher, but he didn't respond to her poems. He responded to her, to her ill situation. He never talked with her about that. And I dare say that in the Chabadic world, no one knew her by her poems. They knew her by her nobility and aristocracy and her kin, famous kin, but not because she was a poet. The way she accepted so beautifully in the Israeli poet world was because Meir Wieseltier, the friend of Yona Volach, a great poet who lives still today. He celebrated his 80th birthday last month. And he was so admired her poetry that he wrote about her a beautiful article in Haaretz after her first book went out. And since then, everything started. She was 56. And I want to say another thing. Zelda didn't marry a Hasidic person. She married Chaim Mishkovsky when she was 36, and it's a very old age for such a well-born woman, you know, because in such a special family, she was the king of so many great people. She was such a treasure that she could be picked up when she was 18 or something, but no, she was married when she was 36 to a man from not a Hasidic family. For a Chabadic, it's a disaster. They had a great love. They had great marriage. They were married for 21 years until he passed away, and she was heartbroken. But I think it's another sign for her, because she could not be accepted in her world.
Wow. Thank you so much. And thank you, Michal, for posting that question, because I forgot about it. And indeed, you asked it also on Tuesday.
Rachel, there are enormous changes now in the ultra-Orthodox society, and we see more and more Orthodox people, youngsters, that are coming to the special events. There is an annual Yortzeit that we are making for Zelda in her Yortzeit. It is a living circle, very, very big and moving circle, about 100, 180 people that are gathering together to read from Zelda's poetry on her Memorial Day, on her Yortzeit. And each year we so happy to see more and more ultra-Orthodox people, also from Chabad, also from other Haredic streams, in the circle of the Yortzeit of Zelda, of Mashiv Haru'ach.
Thank you. And this is the moment to also mention that Mashiv Haru'ach have a Yortzeit for Yuda, as in Amichai, and they have a Yortzeit for Chaim, as in Guri, and so on and so on. All you have to do is learn Hebrew. That's all. And once you have Hebrew, you can join all these events, because nowadays they are all on Zoom. And Audrey, if you're still there, it's your turn now.
Yes, the poems are so beautiful today. I'm going to just focus on one part from Eliaz's poem because it's a tribute. And I don't think it should be left unsaid what a beautiful tribute it is to Ali Yikya, and that Eliaz, he touched your soul. I mean, he was a figure in your life who touched your soul. And I don't know how many other figures like that touched your soul in the way in which you describe here in this poem. But he gave you so much that went into how you look at life and what you do now with your life. So I just thought it was just lovely to notice the beautiful way in which you acknowledged him through this poem.
Thank you. And Eliaz, will you tell us what was the last part, the sentence in Arabic? Anna mushtaq lecha yasid Ali. What does that mean?
Yeah, I combined the Arabic doing all along the poem, and this sentence, Anna mushtaq lak yasid Ali, it's I yearn to you, to
I miss you.
It's even more than longing in Arabic, and we can even hear the close word Hebrew of ishtokekut, l'ishtokek.
Yeah, to yearn, really yearning. Would you like to add maybe something about this person and how he came into your life?
He came into my life like you read so deeply and movingly this poem, and we hadn't talked at all about this poem, and like you said, like it's written in the poem, some of the senior adults in Elkanah, when it was established, during the 70s in the Western Samaria, decided that if we are returning to these places, to these hills, we should learn the culture of the place and the language of the place. And they brought Ali, that was one of the best Arab Israeli teachers for Arabic. He founded with Shlomit Naim the Ulpan Akiva. That was a real startup in those days, that a joint class learned Hebrew and Arabic, joint Jewish and Arab class learned Hebrew and Arabic from co-teachers. One is Israeli and Jewish Israeli, and one is Israeli Arab. And he came to Elkanah and was a real great teacher. And it was for 2 years that we learned Arabic from Ali. And it was stopped after a hand grenade was thrown by Palestinians on one of the vehicles with a family from the Yishuv, from Elkanah. And it was so immediately that after it was, Ali wasn't a part of this terror, but immediately the fear and the trauma led to stop the acknowledgement and the learning of Arabic. And when I was serving in this reserve duty, I was, Rachel, you mentioned the trigger. So there were 2 triggers to this poem. One trigger, like you said, was the song that the Arab woman sang to herself when she collected the onions. And the other one, it was fit together in my mind, in my imagination, was that during my duty on this checkpoint at this same moment, I read in Haaretz that Ali was appointed to be Israeli ambassador.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you for making that connection. And I remember him very well from Ulpan Akiva. I met him in Ulpan Akiva with Shlomit Naim, etc. Thank you. Yes, Dan, bevakasha, go ahead. Please remember to unmute. We cannot hear you when you are muted.
You can hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. That's for Eliaz. When you are talking about the Sfat Adad, you mean the language of the opposite side, or what do you mean?
Language of the Dad. Dad is one of the 26 letters of the Arabic, and Dad, I cannot. My accent is not very well in Arabic, but this is the letter that Arab people for generations, thousands of years, are mentioned this letter to mention the richness of this special language. And this is the proudness, symbolize the proudness, the pride.
The pride in the level of the language.
In the level of the language, the richness of the language.
Okay, because the word Vad means also neged, against, or the opposite. So that's why I wondered, because it has, if that has this connotation, I didn't think it would in your poem, right?
No.
Thank you, Dan, for the question. And Eliaz, I trust you can hear that many of our participants have Hebrew as their native tongue, but they are polite and we are all speaking English here, although we could very quickly rush into Hebrew, but we are not going to do that. Chavirim, any more comments or questions? Anybody? You know, this week we are lucky. It's only 10:14 in Israel and not 11:14 or such. So I'm fine. You know, it's because this lucky 2 weeks when you went into daylight saving and we haven't yet, so it gives us this extra hour, and it's not the middle of the night yet. So go ahead if you have any questions, concerns, comments.
Yes, Yocheved from Sydney.
Yeah.
I didn't catch, thank you. I didn't catch the word that had the meaning that between Eliaz and the gentleman. The special letter in Arabic.
Let me show it to you on the screen. Let me show
Thank
it to you on the screen, not a problem. So where is it? You have it right, right? Yeah, is it Baidze, Eliaz?
Yeah, no, there was a discussion between Eliaz just now and the gentleman.
I know, the word is the Lashon Hadad. I'm just looking for it in the poem.
Okay.
I'm just looking for it for you in the poem, and I cannot find it.
Last line of the first, the last line.
Yes.
Last line of the first stanza.
Correct.
Al Sfat Hadad.
Stanza, yeah.
Oh, it's Hadad.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. All right.
Right. Thank you. Because isn't that some form of discussion in the Arab literature?
No, it was a reference to a pride in the level of the language.
Oh, I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you. And what I wanted to also say was that I lived in Israel, and I just find it's just so moving, and to hear all the poets, and but so I want to thank everyone, and I have questions, but I don't know where to start because I'm not so very. I find sometimes difficult to express myself.
Yocheved, you can always write to me, and I can forward it to any of the poets if you wanted to. When you can, calmly and peacefully form in words and sentences what your questions or comments, and don't hesitate. Write to me, and I will make sure it will get to the proper address. Okay?
Thank you. But I just have one. I do have a few comments. It's the to Bakol with that at the station that. I sometimes, I'm just, for me, that people who sometimes look a bit not quite okay, I think everyone has an nefesh inside, and there always lies in every person the love and what they want for themselves, for the best. But very often, the physical world does all sorts of things different ways, handles different ways. But in the end, there's always, as Bakol experienced, the praying and the yearning. I have myself a nephew who has gone off the derech a little bit. And I found him, saying Birkat HaMazon. So for me, this was a revelation. And also the singer Eliran, I think in one of his words, it was saying that he wanted all the tshuva to be accepted. So whatever he's done in whatever that person has done, that they are returning to the love of God and yearning for God to help them on the way. That's what I think. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me take a moment because Sivan just indicated that she needs to leave shortly. So Sivan, would you like to add something to the conversation or a comment before you have to leave us?
Maybe I will just say that Mashiv Haru'ach played a very main part in my life since one of the editors was Abishar and mine matchmaker, and my first poems were published in Mashiv Haru'ach. And my first meeting with Eliaz was when I was in 12th grade. In my final exam in art, and my poems were part of my exhibition, and then he saw them and he said, well, maybe you will send us some of your poems. And that made me feel like there's future. And I'm very grateful for that. And I think one of the secrets of Mashiv Haru'ach is, well, two secrets. One is that it's very positive. It thinks positively of life and the world, and that it's a family. It really makes a feeling of family to all its poets and the audience.
Okay, toda rabba, toda Sivan very much. Please remember her little organization, Adabra, writing, creative writing for people who have suffered sexual abuse. And I also write to me if you want a connection. And thank you, Sivan, for being with us. I also got a comment from Shlomit, who needs to leave us shortly. So Shlomit, I will let you make your comments before you have to go.
First of all, thank you, Rachel, for being this ambassador of Israeli poetry. And it's amazing how much you do this in so much grace and generosity. And you made the Corona time the best time for so many people who are lucky to know more and read more. So thank you for this. And I just want to add that something that is great about Mashiv Haru'ach, that we didn't stop through the Corona. We kept on, we moved everything to the Zoom, just like you, everything moved to the Zoom. And we discovered that we're more accessible, it's much more democratic, people can join us wherever they are. And this gift of poetry that Mashiv Haru'ach and you share, it's amazing to see how much energy of compassion and generosity and knowledge it brings to the world. So thank you, Rachel. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure. And I attended the Yortzeit for Yuda, I attended the Yortzeit for Guri with you on Mashiv Haru'ach whenever I could. Luckily, you were not doing them on the same days that I'm teaching. Bakol also has to go. So thank you, Shlomit. And Bakol, it's your turn to make your farewell comment for today.
Thank you so much. I was very humbled by your enthusiasm for poetry and your interesting question. It's only moved me how poetry makes hearts close, even when we live in different lands. So sorry for my poor English. I'm extremely tired right now. So thank you so much for your listening and your heart and your response and your very kind question and answer. So thank you so much to you all.
Toda rabba bakol, and we will talk some more. So thank you everybody who had to leave. Florence, a question, comment? And I see you, Marty, you will come next. Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to comment on the fact that you were asking what your class have given us. And for me today, it's also something that just was given to me. I was in 1968 at Upan Akiva with Shlomit and the young man there, the Arab person. And I studied both Hebrew and Arabic there in 1968. And I didn't think about it until right now. And I did not even remember the name of those two names just came back to me. And that's just a beautiful memory for me.
So Florence, you and Eliaz had the same Arabic teacher.
Yes, I did. But he must know much better Arabic than I do at this point.
Okay, thank you so much for that comment. This is exactly the kind of thing that really gives me a lot of joy when this stuff happens in our meetings. And Marty, your turn.
Oh, just a brief comment is that I'm feeling happier today than often. I am so depressed by the news that I get from Israel, and to hear these the stories and the poets that the women that are speaking out, the other poets, Eliaz, and hopefully there are others that are trying to speak to Arabs, and I'm thinking of the book Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor, that
That's
hopefully people will be talking and reading poetry across the lines, and someday there'll be more peace.
Amen. Hallelujah. Halevai. And thank you for that, Marty. And I am checking for more hands. For now, I have mainly, yes, Ed, go ahead. Why not?
Fast point following up on sort of Marty's point, which is there's a real sense now, especially with Koraziming going on, in which we have the opportunity for the diaspora and Israel to get a better understanding as to what is going on, to watch some of the more interesting movements within the orthodoxy within Israel, because I think things tend to become black and white from the outside. And this is an interesting exposure through all of the poets we've had, but especially Elias, in terms of the fact that it's much more nuanced. I was in on a discussion just before this through Hartman and through others about the interesting developments within the Arab political community and how they are reaching out. It is just beginning to open up with the conversation around the Arabs beginning to look for integration and the Jews looking to the Arabs to be integrated. And it's something, it's sort of like spring here. You have spring all the time, but I'm saying that you can begin to see little green. This is sort of the Amichai, spring with a little, you can begin to see the little green things sprouting in the midst of the bombshells, one of his poems. But you get the sense here, which you don't ordinarily get until you have this intimacy, which I think someone else referred to, where Zoom is permitting us to see a lot more the nuance. Then this is from the diaspora looking in, but I think it's also from Israel looking out.
Thank you so much, Ed. Joy, please go ahead.
I find that what's been amazing with your classes is that they've been apolitical until probably today. I find what's been my research for the past 20 years has been with the Haredi community. And my fear has always been that the biggest problem Israel faces is the Haredi community and the secular community. And so today's lesson, today's shiur, has given hope that the Mashiv Haru'ach, there are people from within the Haredi community that are participating in what could normally be called a secular activity. But as Ed just said, it gives hope that there is more merging within the actual society than what is available to us when reading newspapers, when reading media, that there are movements there. As Ed said, there are green shoots that are sprouting up. But for me in particular, it's very moving to know that the Haredi community is becoming more integrated, because that's not been my feeling and not been evidenced in research for many, many years. Thank you again. It's been an amazing session, as always.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And yes, my sessions occasionally had political elements more than once, and we survived them by agreeing to respect a certain mode of existence, of listening, of indeed nuanced poetry, which is what allows us to carry on these conversations, including the ideological elements. And thank you, Joyce, for that. Okay, Chaverim, any more? Chaverot too. I don't want you to think I'm only talking to the guys. Everybody, please. Anybody would like to?
I have something.
Yeah.
Elaine.
Yeah, go ahead,
Will
Elaine.
Will you bring this group back again, please?
Will I bring this group back again? Okay, I think I should. And we will talk with Eliaz and Efrat. and maybe we will get you involved a little bit when choices are made for the Shabbat anthology, the bilingual one. Maybe that will be a good reason to call people together. Okay, but thank you for the suggestion. And you remember when Sivan and Shlomit were here, you asked for them to come back, and
Yes.
here indeed. So I listened to you. It's not just empty words. Okay, and I will try to make that happen. Thank you. Somebody has their mic open and we have some background noise. So please make sure that you turn them off. Well, let's roll. Ed, I will speak to you about that. I will write to you and tell you where we are on that. And maybe I will bring you into a smaller group of conversation on that one. Okay, thank you very much. And do I have any further comment? Eliaz and Efrat, I will let you conclude this meeting. Go ahead. Yalla.
Efrat, are you there? We are in the same home, but with the two.
Yeah, he's here. She's here.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for all of you for being here, and for Rachel for bringing us here, and all the partnership that we're having from now on. And we would like to come back when the Shabbat poetry anthology will
materialize.
issued. And there are many things. I think that is something we all should know, that the newspaper and the television, they do not bring the good things that are in life. And in Mashiv Haru'ach, we have so many relationships with so many people that don't think the same as us, don't act the same as us, and we feel very much at home with everyone. And we respect each one to choose how they want to live their life. And we listen to everyone. And that's why some of our issues are in many subjects that are very burning subjects, like the hitnatkut, the
disengagement.
The
disengagement.
The disengagement, or the mountain of the Har Bayit and Temple Mountain, and many of those are subjects for our issues, and there are so many people that write that do not think the same, and that's what makes our being interesting, and we should just know how to live together without agreeing about everything.
Efrat, I have a request from Eliaz too. Some people missed a point here. Could I ask you to move to the same room?
Just a second.
Okay, Efrat and Eliaz are a couple. They are married with 4 kids. One of them married already. We had the wedding on Zoom a while ago. Okay, so I think this answers your question, Deborah. Okay.
Now we are sharing the same chair.
We are married for the past 26 years.
Yeah. And Mashiv Haru'ach is also 26. Efrat joined Mashiv Haru'ach, like she said last week, when we, the poets, thought that we can make a festival, a poetry festival, and it was a great idea, but we hadn't.
They didn't have the tools, so they brought me. So I'll be the producer. And since then, I'm in Mashiv Haru'ach.
And without Efrat, Mashiv Haru'ach couldn't get where he is now today.
And I see that in the chat that we look very young. We have children between the ages of 20 and 24, 4 children. So we're not that young, but we're still young.
Chaverim, I think this is the best note to conclude our session on, bearing in mind that we have been together now for 2.5 hours. I think it's a decent moment to close our session. I wish you all Shabbat Shalom, of course, and I'm looking forward to see you, if you will, on the Suskova session on Tuesday. And Efrat and Eliaz, if you want to get out and come back for a minute to conclude this, then we can do that after everybody leaves. I will close this and reopen it for us afterwards, okay?
אלפי תודות, אלפי תודות.
שבת
חוויה, ממש חוויה.
תודה רבה.
שבת שלום. חוויה בלתי רגילה, בלתי רגילה.
Shabbat Shalom.
שבת שלום. להתראות.
Time went so quickly, I did not realize.
Get your vaccinations. We want to see you traveling already.
Yeah, but to Israel, you don't allow people to come in. The airports are closed.
Okay, they will open. תודה רבה, חברים. I'm going to close this meeting very shortly.
תודה רבה.
Rest of the day. לילה טוב to the Israelis. And להתראות.